like many other young novelists who attempt to write books, they often resort to telling their friends about it, going into long-winded discussions about these novels that have never been finished, and eventually it just becomes a kind of rather sad dinner party story. And that's exactly what happened to my novel over the period of the last 3 years until I decided to formally make it into a talk, and that is the talk that I'm going to be doing for you today. Now, when I say that the novel is unwritten, there were certain passages that were very clear in my mind, and certain parts of the structure of the novel that I really knew that I wanted to exist in a particular way. And so I've written the first line, which is also the beginning of the end of the novel, and it goes like this. It is 7 o'clock on the 20th of November 1975, and the news of Franco's death is ringing in my ears. I am blinded, can see. For 5 years, I've built a sexual empire to oppose him. Everything I've learned about my inner sexuality, I've learned through him. I do not know myself, but through his oppression. The novel is set in the Hotel Mumba, which was a hotel in Catalonia in northern Spain that my parents owned and ran from the early 70s until the end of the 1970s. And that was a period when a dictator named General Franco had a stronghold and grip on Spain. And the novel is set, as I mentioned, in this hotel that my parents bought in 1972. Now, my father is Japanese and my mother is British, and neither of them felt they could live in each other's countries, and so they decided to move to a completely neutral ground without even knowing really that it was a fascist dictatorship, and they bought this hotel and started to run it. Here are some images of the interior. This is the restaurant above the bar. You can see this very typical terracotta floor tiling, these check tablecloths. And it actually came to the point where some of you might have been downstairs and visited the exhibition. It came to the point where I had to make a full-scale reconstruction of this bar, and I'll let you go and see that afterwards. This is an image of my father arriving in Spain for the first time on the Iberia flight. And you can see in his 70s style with his handbag and stylish clothes. I've always thought my father looked rather like a homosexual in this image. Now, like everyone, I grew up with stories that our families tell us over the dining table. But for me, these stories were rather more exotic than usual. Growing up in rainy England and hearing about this period in time in Spain, this dusty sort of memories that crept into the dining table in rainy Britain. And these are stories of the Franco oppression, the guards coming into the bar, putting their machine guns onto the bar and forcing my parents to buy them drinks, things of this nature. Other things like the waiters coming and playing flamenco tunes on the back of the tray, and there'll be a video of a section of that later on in the talk. And I always thought, because of all of these stories, that it would make a fantastic novel, but when I really thought about what kind of novel I wanted this to be, it became clear that I wanted to have a personal lens on this period. I wanted it to somehow be about a homoerotic experience taking place within this bar. Now, there are a number of figures that were important to me, like Federico Garcia Lorca, that you're looking at on the screen here, who was a homosexual poet that was killed under the emerging Franco dictatorship. And when I started to do my research about what kind of other writers in Catalonia, gay writers, had written about that time, I kept on coming up against a kind of brick wall. I could never find the material I wanted. And it occurred to me, embarrassingly late, I should say, that of course it was because of the censorship, that Franco's dictatorship paper was in fact one of the most dangerous materials against the state. And it was because of this that everything was censored. There was no erotic writing. It was rather sad when I first realised this point, but also very exciting because I thought, well, I know all of my parents' stories. I know the period so well, and I have characters and a setting. It's so clear in my mind that perhaps I can be the first person to write the first gay erotic novel from a first-person perspective set in my parents' hotel. Now, you obviously can see a kind of problem occurring here, a kind of conflict already in the project. Whereas on the one hand I had this political history that I felt hadn't been fully explored in the way other political histories have. I mean, homosexual oppression under Franco is not something that is very well documented for obvious reasons. But on the other hand, I had to use my family's life story to tell this. And it was because of this conflict of family and eroticism, that the whole project was driven underground for a period of a few years where I started to publish my erotic texts in gay magazines, mostly in America. And you're looking at some of those magazines that I initially approached on the screen, rather colourful gentlemen appearing on those covers. And the first stories that I wrote to these people were all rejected. Everybody said there was too much politics and not enough sex. And it wasn't until I discovered this kind of fanzine, which is called Straight to Hell. It's a New York-based magazine that publishes real-life accounts by gay men, real-life sordid things that go on in toilets and truck stops and all sorts of places, that my first writing was published. Now, again, they said that they're not quite racy enough, that I should sex them up a bit. But after a little bit of back and forth, with them respecting as well that the stories were written in first person, I was managed to publish my first story. But as I was writing to these people, of course, as every good erotic writer needs a good pen name, and I racked my brain to think about what that could be, and eventually I settled on my father's name, Candy Fruit. The first story, I'm going to read an extract from it, goes like this. I've never told this story for fear of exposure. This is the first time. While I was running the bar at the Hotel Mumba, I had developed quite a good relationship with a particular macho guardia civil who would visit regularly, unstrapping his machine gun from across his chest and dropping it onto the counter, demanding whiskey. I always happily supplied his thirst, feeling aroused by his uniformed presence, knowing also that I had no choice but to comply with his demands. Guardia Civil could get violent. One night, the soldier stayed late and was unusually bawdy, drunk, as if he was celebrating, so I kept the bar open late to keep him friendly. At a late point in the night, he suddenly sat wide awake at the bar, intensely watching me work. As he watched me, he proceeded to unzip his tight army trousers and rub his cock against the bar that I had just polished, before picking up his gun and sliding the black metal neck of it against his groin and hanging balls. He pointed the gun towards me and told me to sniff the neck of the gun. I remember feeling a mixture of excitement and fear, the smell of metal and stifled crotch. By this point, his cock was standing bolt upright, and he told me to move to his side of the bar. He forced my legs apart and leaned over me and began to frisk me, military style, before dropping to his knees, pulling down my trousers, and the story goes on.